Chapter 11 of Winning His Way by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11, in which Frank takes a manly revenge on Duncan Roach. The whole crowd rushed out of the building after the frenzied Duncan, leaving Frank to his own devices. But that manly fellow had caught sight of his blazing enemy as he fled from the room, and realizing that Duncan's situation was a critical one, he forgot all about his own pain and smarting, and followed the rest with the idea of lending a helping hand, if necessary, to save the boy who had tortured him so severely. Duncan had jumped into the river, the rapid current of which was carrying him away from the shore. His strangely attired companions shouted to him and gesticulated frantically, but not even Edwards, the coolest-headed fellow of the party, made an effort to swim out to his aid. Every one of them knew that the river was dangerous at this point, and self-preservation was the first thought with each. Not so Frank Morris. It was the work of a moment to cast aside his jacket and shoes and plunge into the stream. Taking note of the position of Duncan, who appeared to be going under for the second time, he swam sturdily forward, breasting the water with sinews of steel. The other boys, many of whom had by this time discarded their queer rig, encouraged him with shouts of approbation. "Hi, he's come up! A little bit further to the right, Morris!" cried Peter Winch. "Look out for that sunken rock out there, Morris!" shouted another warningly. "You're a dandy, old chap!" "By George!" exclaimed Walt Edwards enthusiastically. "Frank Morris is a fine fellow after all. I feel madder than dirt to think that we've had a hand in his roasting." "Same here," said Eddie Hicks. "Duncan had so much to say against him that I thought he was a little prig. Now look at him, going out yonder in his condition to save Roach from drowning." "That's right," chipped in Spencer Lickett. "If a fellow had served me as Duncan did, I'd think a long time before I'd risk my skin to pull him out of a hole." Duncan was going under for the fatal third time when Frank grasped him by the collar of his coat, where it showed through a hole in his robe, and the half-drowned boy tried to seize him in his wild struggle for life. But Frank was pretty cool, and saw his danger in time to avoid it. He held on to Duncan and began to push him shoreward, the other boys continuing to follow him down the bank, keeping pace with the current which bore them away. Presently their attention was attracted by a sudden glare behind. "Jumping Jupiter!" cried Winch. "The Benson house is on fire!" And so it was. The burning embers which had been scattered about the room when Duncan made his involuntary dive into the fireplace were producing unexpected results. The haunted house was evidently doomed. "Say," said Edwards, "where did Duncan tie Morris's horse?" "Give it up," answered Hicks, looking a bit startled. "It won't do to have the animal burned up after what Morris is doing for Duncan. I'm going back," said Edwards, and Edwards started for the blazing building. "I'll go with you," volunteered Hicks. They set off at a run and presently arrived at the scene of the conflagration. The pony was standing where Duncan had secured her bridle to the post at the corner of the house, but was becoming restive, as if aware of her peril. It did not take more than the fraction of a minute for Edwards to unhitch and lead the horse out of harm's way. "That's the end of the haunted house," remarked Hicks, as they stood aloof and watched the flames eating through the dry timber. "And the last of the ancient order of ghosts, too," said Walt. "Oh, I don't know about that," objected Hicks. "But I won't stand for any more roasting seances." "I should say not. Duncan carried things altogether too far tonight. He had a personal grudge against Morris and tried to get square with him. It was all very funny at first, but when I saw the fellow was actually suffering, I thought it was time to make a kick. I suppose I'm responsible for this fire as well as Roach's pickle." "How do you make that out?" asked Eddie. "If I hadn't hit him that time, the trouble wouldn't have occurred. But he made me mad by the manner he pushed me out of the way when we stepped up to help Morris, just as if he was the whole thing and the rest of us so much dirt. He isn't so much by a jugful, and I guess the fellows will be kind of shy of him after this. I shouldn't be surprised. To tell you the honest truth, I'm sick of the frills he puts on. Frank Morris may not be our equal socially, but he's the kind of fellow I'd like to cotton to. I've sided against him all along because I believe those yarns of Duncan's, but it's my opinion that he was lying right along. I dare say the Roach can twist the truth to suit his purposes. Let's lead the horse down after the rest of the push. Morris ought to have Duncan ashore by this time." Frank Morris brought the almost unconscious Duncan Roach to the riverbank nearly half a mile below the Benson house, which was now on fire from cellar to roof, furnishing a fine bonfire which illuminated the countryside and attracted general attention in the town. "You down here, one of you fellows," said Frank energetically after Duncan had been lifted out of the water. "And the rest, you give him a roll. He may have swallowed some of the river water, and the quicker you get out of him, the better." This suggestion was at once carried out, and the luckless heir of the Roach estates was treated to a rough and ready shaking up which brought him to his senses after a little while. It was a warm night, and the dunking did not greatly inconvenience Morris. He simply removed his garments, and with the assistance of one of the boys, wrung them out as dry as possible and put them on again. "I'll have to let my engagement go tonight," said Frank. "I was going out to Farmer Gray's, but you lads have knocked that in the head for me. I am sorry, as it means that I will have to disappoint a young lady." "Don't worry about that," said Peter Winch with a grin. "That engagement was a put-up job on our part, to decoy you out here tonight. I got my sister to write the note you received with Elsie Gray's name tacked to it. She didn't know what I intended doing with it, so you can't blame her. Duncan suggested the plan, and I put it in force." "Kind of a mean trick all around that you've played on me, don't you think?" said Frank indignantly. "My back feels as raw and sore as though it were covered with boils. I don't expect to get over your treatment for a week." "What's done can't be undone," replied Winch apologetically. "We didn't mean to carry matters so far. Duncan kind of engineered the racket, for he's had it in for you this long time. The rest of us, I guess, are willing to make it up to you any way you say. If you won't give the affair to the public, it's easy enough for you fellows to apologize now. You haven't any idea of the torment I suffered during those last minutes, especially when your leader pressed my clothes against my skin," and Frank shuddered at the bare recollection. "It was simply terrible. I shall have some idea after this of the tortures of the Spanish Inquisition." "Well, it's up to you to say what you're going to do about it," put in Walt Edwards, who, with Hicks, had just led up Frank's horse. "We're in it up to our necks, and you've recognized most of us by this time. If you press a charge against us, we'll go to jail. It will serve us right, of course, but it will be rather hard on our folks, that's all." "Most anybody would make you sweat for the kind of treatment you've handed out to me," said Frank resolutely. "But I'm willing to believe you fellows didn't intend to harm me, and that most of what I suffered was due to Duncan Roach. As he has suffered, and will suffer more yet, from the looks of his arms, I may not let this thing go any further." "But you've got to promise me that you will quit such kind of larks in the future. If I hear of any more, I'll give you a roast in the paper that you won't like." "All right," said Walt Edwards. "Let it go at that. Furthermore, I think it is only right that each of us agree to get you 5 subscribers and 1 good advertisement for the Argus in recognition of the square way you are treating us. If Duncan doesn't do twice as much for you after what you've done for him, we'll cut him dead." "No," said Frank. "I won't accept a favor from Duncan Roach. He treated me like a savage tonight, and I've got square by saving his life. If the rest of you want to do as Walter Edwards has proposed, I'll accept it as an evidence of your goodwill. That's all there is to it. Now, I'm going home. I thank you, Edwards, for bringing me my pony. I wouldn't have her injured for a farm. I wish you all good night." End of chapter 11.